It is my great pleasure now to turn the stage over to the Hawkeye State Congressman, who I am supporting. I believe he's a great conservative. I admire and respect him. Please give him a warm Texas welcome to Congressman Steve King.
Thank you. Thank you all very, very much. This is great to be back here in Texas. The welcome last time was so great it was hard to go home again. And I just come down here and I see all of this good, solid, conservative energy that's here. And I want to especially want to thank the Texas Patriot PAC for pulling this together and making this happen. This is a message that will come out tonight, and this echoes around the country. And I want to thank also Congressman Kevin Brady for all he's done to make this happen. It makes my stay here really good every time. Thank you very much, Kevin. You know, I have, since I was in high school, I've looked forward to a Lincoln-Douglas style debate. And I'm so glad we have the two Georgian candidates here to have this debate. And maybe the two Texans will go to Georgia and do the same thing after you set the standard here, gentlemen. But my charge is to seek to set the stage for this discussion on entitlements. And this budget grows so fast that even when you sit inside of Congress and watch it every day, it's pretty hard to get a handle on what it all means. So I'd like to first address the issue of each American's share of the debt. And the slideshow that's going on the sides here, I describe it this way. My most recent granddaughter is just learned to walk, turned a year a little bit ago. Her name is Reagan Ann King. And when she came into the world, the national debt was $44,000. And now her share of the national debt, you'll see on the screen over there, is not quite $48,000. But to put that in perspective, the average student loan debt upon leaving college is $24,000. Now, can you imagine coming into the world owing Uncle Sam twice as much as you might owe if you're a college graduate to pay off your tuition? And by the time little Reagan starts fifth grade, she will owe $88,000 as her share of the national debt. That's how this thing is growing. That line doesn't exactly show as fast as that's coming up, but it is growing up very, very fast. And this share of the national debt sinks us all eventually to the point where it becomes hundreds of thousands of dollars for each individual. And then also, you know, we often hear, well, let's just cut the budget, cut the spending, get this thing down, get it to balance. And this is within the context now of the Republican budget, or the Ryan budget as we've come to know it. And the next chart shows the pie chart. And on it is the breakdown. Now, if it's not brown or green, it's entitlement spending. It's autopilot spending if it's not brown or green. And the green services, foreign aids, justice, aid to government functions, etc. That's the part that we can shrink that down some. And the other part that is brown is defense, national defense. I don't want to shrink that down much. I think we need to defend this country. But all of the rest, 62.3% of that budget is on autopilot. And it is a very, very difficult task to be able to shrink this. I tried to do so by cutting off all the funding to Obamacare. I didn't get that done yet. But that's one of the things. Then you go to the next slide, spending and revenues, to see how this thing is growing annually. And there's an arrow on that red line that shows the average revenue for the federal government, if you go back to World War II and run it out to today, is about 18% of GDP. If you project that 18% of GDP out, the horizontal red line, that is adjusted for inflation and growth in GDP, you see what happens with the projected spending. And I should also make a bit of a definition. Blue line on top, baseline spending. I remember being antagonized by what the Democrats did in the early 90s about the automatic spending. When they said they're cutting the anticipated growth, that is the anticipated growth, and we do have to cut it, otherwise it will break us all. But if in order to get our spending down to the 18% of GDP which is the historical amount that the federal government has collected, you can see that the entitlements swallow up all of that going down the line. And if you put interest on top of that, you can see how interest grows out, and by 2050, it becomes another entitlement that you just can't get out. We must service our interest, and we've had that debate. And the national debt, baseline spending projections on the national debt screen show they clear out of sight. I mean, it goes on up into a national debt of $130 or so trillion. And then, but under the Ryan plan, the red line, by the way, doesn't mean red ink. That means Republican now. That's one the Democrats put over on us. And so red is what happens if the Republican budget plan gets kicked in. It does flatten out the national debt, and eventually it balances. It balances, though, 26 years down the road, and that's called draconian. We are up against a very big problem, but I know that we have individuals here tonight that will do a great job of solving it. And as I set this out again, annual deficits, the next screen. Here under the Ryan plan is the red line, and the baseline projected spending is the blue line. Now the blue line, you carry that thing out to around 2050, and you're looking at $10 trillion a year in deficit spending. And that $10 trillion a year is you add that up, do that for 10 years, that's $100 trillion. So that's how we get out there into the stratosphere if we don't do something. The Ryan budget plan bends that curve and takes us back to the balanced budget, which you can see the arrow pointing to it there. That's not until 2037. So we have a very difficult task. I'd want to balance it sooner than that. So does everybody else. And I voted for a budget that would balance it sooner than that. But we have the automatic spending, Medicare, for example, that shows what happens with Medicare. It goes out of sight again. It doesn't require much embellishment. The blue line goes out of sight. And under the Ryan plan, with the premium support and some of the other measures that are in place or that are proposed in the plan, it bends that curve down, and we get to the point where we get to a manageable Medicare situation. That will be the first entitlement discussion that we have. And then a little refresher screen again on total spending, just so you get the idea. After we've gone through this now, you can look back and see if it's not brown, it's not green, it's on autopilot. 62.3% of the budget on autopilot. 37.6% of the budget is all you can address under discretionary spending, and we're borrowing 41 cents out of every dollar we're spending today. That's how bad this is. It is going to take grit, determination, and support from all of you to launch the next president to the White House with a mandate from the Tea Parties and the people across this country and the constitutional conservatives and the Republicans and all the people that believe in constitutional government and fiscal responsibility to solve this problem. And then the next entitlement is the Social Security slide. And I'll just speak to, when I went into Congress, they told me that the Social Security Trust Fund would start to draw more out of it than it had in at 2017. And by 2042, it will have drained the trust fund. But in reality, we've reached zero out on that now as far as incomes and payout. And we have a long ways to go now to get that back under track. On the top part of that, the darkest of blue shows you deficits in Social Security as far as the eye can see. The lower portion of that is a proposal, not part of the Ryan budget, but a roadmap to prosperity that he has drawn that shows that with an investment of individuals and a portion of their Social Security contribution, we can get back into the black with the Social Security Trust Fund, but it takes a long ways before we get that right, because a generation generally has to turn over to get that done. So I've laid out all but I guess the Medicaid component of this. Medicaid's in trouble. It goes into the stratosphere also, and the Ryan budget plan flattens out the Medicaid expenditures, and it must be. But what's happened is Obamacare has pushed millions and will push millions into Medicare. And they've lowered the standards for eligibility, so proof of citizenship now becomes a test to a 9-digit Social Security number. That's the picture. And there's a proposal to block grant Medicare to the states. I think that's one of the things that we'll hear from the candidates on tonight. And then just to wrap this up, the annual deficits component of this. Now, the blue line on that is the baseline spending projected, Congressional Budget Office. Huge deficits going down to, I think that number is $10 trillion a year, which I mentioned earlier. But under the Ryan proposal, those deficits are reduced out until a balanced budget happens, 26 years, I know. But beyond that, if you see where the arrow points in the line, that hash mark on the line, that's balance. So from there on to the right, below the red line and down to the hash mark, that's deficit reduction. I pray I live to see the day that we have deficit reduction in this federal government. And I am hopeful that we will take a big step tonight on how to get there. And I know that the individuals we have that will do this history-making, classical, Lincoln-Douglas debate, we're going to keep you entertained for the balance of this. And I'm so glad to have an in-ring side seat to all of this. Thank you all very much, and I look forward to this discussion.